Small forward, Bob McAdoo got some serious consideration. His years in Buffalo as a scorer were just remarkable. So, sorry, Dad. And what Julius Erving obviously meant to both leagues was incredible. Elvin Hayes at the 4 spot, just a remarkable player. And then lastly, Kareem dominated the center position, both in Milwaukee and when he went to the Los Angeles Lakers. So those would be my 5.
Only thing I disagree with is Tiny Archibald. At the point guard position, I know for that 1 year Brent talked about, but for the younger generation, he showed you that you can score the basketball, but you can also share and get other people involved. And I think that was good for the game connection.
Can't go wrong with this guy.
Yeah, at the end of the day.
I would like to put Pistol Pete at 2 because for me, he was the first, no offense, but he was the first white guy with style and flair that I've seen. So
why would I take offense to that?
Because you're a white guy. He's light skinned. No, but my question to the family is, was he the first white guy to have the flash and style and between the legs and behind the back? I mean, because my the move was the move he did to Jerry West.
Pete Maravich, he would take the basketball, right, and he would fake the pass. He would bounce it here, bounce it behind him, fake the pass, and you as a defender would jump. And he'd turn back around, catch the ball, and shoot. That was a hell of a move. And I was like, okay, I got to try that. So I tried it in the game, and Steve Coulter stole it.
So have we answered some questions on the 70s? Are we done with the 70s?
Yeah.
We're ready to move on to the 80s?
Yeah.
We will move on to the 80s when we come back here on Open Court.
Ernie's not white.
He's light-skinned.
It became the popular sport in the United States in the 80s because of Bird and Magic and those guys and Isaiah. To me, it's still the greatest decade of basketball.
Johnson over Parrish. He hits it. Michael at the foul line. A shot on Elo. Good! The Bulls win! They win it!
All right, back here on Open Court, and we move in this discussion of the best 5, sometimes starting 5, sometimes best 5 overall, sometimes NBA, sometimes ABA. It's a wide-ranging conversation. That we go to the 80s. And now it starts to get interesting because now we get into areas where you played against guys and, well, I don't even need to show you lists of things. I can just say, who was the best point guard of the 1980s, Isaiah?
Come on, Zeke, say yourself, Zeke! Say yourself, Zeke!
No, honestly, I will have to say Magic Johnson. I believe I'm the second best point guard of that era. But Magic Johnson was the best point guard, in my opinion, to ever play. And my 5, if you want the 5,
Yeah, I did, of course.
So I'm going Magic at the 1, Jordan at the 2, Bird, J, Dr. J at 3 and 4, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at the 5. Those are my 5 players of the 80s.
3D, how does
Can I
that
ask
sound?
you a question
How does that
real
sound to
quick?
you? Yeah, go ahead.
Given that I just want to say, given
But
that
I was better than Magic.
I know that Magic Johnson and Isaiah Thomas, I don't think on this panel that anybody's going to have anybody else to really discuss when we're talking about the best of that decade. But for you, Isaiah, who are guys, just quick off the top of your head, that you compete against at the point guard that you felt you guys were so great that just didn't get their just due?
I would say in the 80s, for a short period of time, I thought Mark Price had a run in this league for about 2 years or so that was just about as good as anybody. Definitely Mo Cheeks, Gus Williams.
I have one for you.
Tiny Archibald was still,
DJ?
at
Dennis?
his,
Dennis.
But saying all that,
There was 2.
none of them were like Magic. None of us.
Or you.
None of us were like Magic. And the reason why I say that is because in the 80s, I thought we came in and we had original styles. You know, we brought originality to the game. Magic came in and it was like something we had never seen.
That's right.
I thought when I came in, the way I was playing the point guard and the way I was dribbling and moving, it was a different style that the game hadn't seen before. Dr. J was an original. You know, Kareem was an original. So it's like, to me, when you look at the '80s and I look at Jordan, like it was like when he walked in, it was like, damn.
Is he for real?
Well, you okay, I remember when we first played against him, it was the Olympic, the Olympic
84.
team
Right,
in
84.
'84 in Phoenix. And they was doing the pros coming to play against
The Olympic team.
the Olympic
Yep.
team. And I remember Coach Knight saying, Coach Knight was coaching him, he said, this one a little different now. That's what the old school coach, this one a little different now. And so, you know, in Phoenix, it was hot in the summer, and you know, you watch guys dunking and everything, but he had a different kind of bounce, you know, jumping and dunking, and I was like, okay, all right, that's kind of nice, And then the game started, and this dude was so fast and so quick, he was like, wait, wait.
It's a PG show. It's a PG-13 show, Coach.
but some curse words are necessary for description.
That's when television and basketball really took off. You had the Lakers, you had the '80s, you had the floppy hair of Larry Bird, you had the style and grace and flair of Showtime and Magic, and then you had Isaiah and his Bad Boys. And before they were the Bad Boys, I mean, they were putting up 135 points with him and Kelly Tripucka and guys like that, John Long, my mentor. So that's when the '80s, and for a lot of us, okay.
But let me clarify this for the youngsters on the panel. Yeah, Jordan was a great player in the '80s, but they were finishing third and fourth in the division.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay, so I know all y'all watching want to say, oh, Jordan was he was great in the '90s.
Yes.
He dominated in the '90s.
Yes.
But in the '80s, he was out in the first round.
And that era for me is
That's all I got to say.
but to answer all that
Message.
that era was the first, to me, the wow era. When you went at each position, each guy, you said wow. Even when you got down to Larry Bird, who wasn't that athletic. Hey,
No, you
hey,
go
Rook,
wow.
Hey, Rook,
You wow,
get ready.
wow.
Make this move, pump fake, and scoring. You make the move.
You wow.
Don't have a seat. But that was the point, that
You
each
wowing.
position you wowed in that era.
Go ahead.
You know, and that was the time, maybe for me, when I fell in love with the game. And you know, for me, you know, first of all, the four greatest that I ever saw in person were Isaiah, Magic, Michael, and Bird. And as you said, Reggie, as television merged, as these great transcendent players emerged, it just was a perfect storm that I think we really owe the success of this league to that time.
I got a chance to be able to talk, touch, and play against Isaiah and Magic. And you talking about debated back in Michigan, who's the better point guard? I think that debate went from nationwide and still goes on. Those were two guys, similar built, similar places growing up, one from inner city in Chicago, one from Lansing. So for me, being right there in Detroit, I thought it was rite of passage. I could walk up to Isaiah, ask him a question, and he showed me a move. I thought everybody could do that. I could walk up to Magic and he could teach me how to play. I could walk up to George Gervin at almost every recreation center in Saints City and they stopped their workout and take a young guy, I was very young, and I could go play 2-on-2, me and Magic versus you and Aguirre.
Right.
I thought everybody had that. I had no, not knowing, but what those two guys did. And I think for me, obviously, is Michael at the 2, Larry Bird at the 3. I have Charles at the 4 and Moses at the 5.
I was going to say we
forget all around amount of rebound.
Yeah, you can look at this decade and you can list guys, okay, who do not make my starting 5 and say, well, that's a pretty good starting 5 right there. I mean, and you bring up Josh, I mean, think about Kevin McHale, you talk about Karl Malone, you talk about the late, great Moses. And let's center on the power forward position.
Moses is my 4, Kareem is my 5. And I got the same as him. Larry Bird.
You just get to change. Y'all get to change the position. I'm going with best 5.
Yeah, well, that's what I
Get
do.
your
Your 5, and I'll go with my 5.
Call 4 or 5.
I'm going with Magic, Michael, Larry, Moses, Kareem.
So the 80s, unbelievable decade. 90s promises more of the same. And I'm sure we'll hear some stories about.
Now it gets tricky.
About going head-to-head with some of these
Now
guys.
it gets tricky.
Who are the best players of the decades. The 90s next here on Open.
What's the deal with Scotty?
Wait a minute, wait, ho. I don't mind Michael Jordan saying,
Thank
I
you.
didn't want Isaiah to be on the dream team.
Thank you.
But if Scotty Pippen, man, come on.
Welcome back to Open Court. We moved to the 1990s as we.
Well, speaking of the 1990s, what did you say about Dream Team?
I was so.
It was wrong that Shaq and I wasn't on the dream team. It was just wrong.
And I still,
100% amen.
think Dream Team 2 could beat Dream Team 1. And I don't care who like it.
What? I was on Dream Team 2. I forgot I was on that team. I forgot.
So, what did you walk into in 1995 as you came into this league?
Wow. You know, I think the league obviously was post-Jordan. Jordan had sort of retired for the first time. And the legends of the 80s who kind of played a little bit into the 90s were retiring as well. Isaiah had just left in Detroit, Magic a few years earlier, Bird. So the league was sort of maybe in a bit of a transition as Shaquille was emerging, you know, Reggie
Emerging?
Walls.
I was emerged already. No. Whatever that was. Who was the first pick me word this morning? Not Alonzo Mourning.
That was my train of thought.
I was with him when he wrote that one too. I was with him when he wrote that. Emerged.
No, but I mean, but the league was in transition, I think, and younger guys were emerging as the new stars, as the new pillars of the league. And Shaq, although he was already emerged.
And the interesting thing about this, when we talk about the 90s, is you guys played against all these guys who are up for consideration in here. So, 3D, who would be your team of the 90s if you had to limit it to 5? And now it's your 5 best, or it's 5 by position?
And be careful how you answer that number 5 spot.
I mean, it's a no-brainer who my center
okay.
is. It's a no-brainer.
Just checking.
Power forward,
Put these hands on you.
Karl Malone.
What?
Intentionally. You know what? If I can say this, Isaiah, he intentionally opened up an old wound.
Sound like Little John over there.
Good. Hey, you've got him in stitches with that comment.
Watch this.
Wound and stitches, they go together.
I remember.
2 guard, obviously.
Stop snitching.
2 guard, obviously. 2 guard MJ.
Okay.
And my point guard, I'm going with John Stockton.
Oh, Lord, look at that.
No, I'm good with that. I was all right.
It was just my power forward.
Stockton, Jordan, Malone, and Shaq.
And then my small forward, with Dominique Wilkins, just to give him some love.
In the 90s?
Well, I know at 90 he was still giving us buckets. Now it might not be, but that's what I'm going with. I'm leaving it at that.
In the 90s, I would
No,
take
I
him
wouldn't.
over Dominique.
In the 90s, I would go, and I know
Dominique was
some
on the
people-
Achilles.
Yeah, he had,
I have Scottie
And
Pippen.
then
Scotty would be in the 90s. And I know that
I was waiting for it.
I had a great 6 years, but I think I didn't win. And I didn't have, you know, we're judged, as Reggie said earlier, on postseason. I didn't have great success in the 90s in the postseason. So, you know, if that's part of the criteria, then yeah, Scotty gets it. But head up, you know.
Head up.
I bet my numbers.
Head up.
My numbers were, you know.
You talk about the numbers being very similar, and they were, except that that you averaged more points, rebounds, and assists than he did.
No, Bird, wait. Let's
I got more touches.
Let's acknowledge on the real who this guy really is sitting here, because when Jordan was retired and Grant Hill was coming into the league, we were talking about passing the mantle
To Grant.
Yes. You was going. So it ain't like you won. Scottie Pippen couldn't carry the league. Jordan carried the league. We're talking about a guy like yourself carrying the league. So you can't sit there and be like, oh, well, you know, Scott, you know.
Hey, you know what? I'll let you say it. You want to say
the worst Grant Hill ever.
No, but it's like real. No, Stan, you know, it's like.
You know what? Damn it, it's me.
What?
I'm going forward.
Does Scottie Pippen have pictures of you or something? What's the deal with Scottie?
Wait a minute, wait. Ho.
Something's going on.
I'm messing with you.
Did Michael, did he want him on the team?
Well, I can't speak for Michael, but no, I did not want him on the team.
I don't mind Michael Jordan saying, I didn't want Isaiah to be on the dream team. I don't mind, you know, if Larry Bird said, I don't want Isaiah to be on the dream team. But if Scottie Pippen say, I don't want Isaiah to be on the dream team.
That's the problem.
Man, come on. You can't say nothing.
Okay,
I got a new topic. You can't say nothing. If Jordan is like, look, I'm not playing. If Isaiah plays, okay, all right. Scottie Pippen, I'm not playing. If Isaiah plays, man, go to the park.
Freedy, I need you to get up for a second. Get up for a second if you would, Freedy.
Okay.
And Isaiah, lay down on the couch. How long have you been harboring?
Oh,
this,
man.
Isaiah? Are you feeling better now that it's come out, Isaiah?
Well, you know, Ernie, it's been a while. It's been on my mind, you know, for about, 25 years right now.
Does this feel like a weight is being lifted off of you?
Well, yeah, because I finally get to talk about it and just, the whole dream team experience. And again, I got no problems with, the greatest player to ever play say he don't want to play with me, or Magic saying he don't. But anybody below them talking about they don't want to play with me? Anybody?
Excuse me, Mr. Thomas.
And I say below them?
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Your hour is up. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to charge you more. But I'm glad you feel better. Okay, let's move on. Very good. Thank you. Very nice.
Coach.
That's awesome. Okay, Shaq, tell me about the 90s.
I'm going to go at the 5 spot. I'm going to go with Akeem Olajuwon. Because for me, I know I was coming in and I was emerging / already emerged. He was the only guy that I couldn't figure out. I couldn't figure him out. And he was the only guy that I couldn't intimidate. The Georgetown boys, we all know they're going to fake left and go right. Rick Smith used to kill me early on, too. But
You say fake left and go right.
yeah, fake hard left. Go right the whole time, yo. Just go right. Go ahead, Alonzo. Go right and give me that dumbass runner hook. But anyway, him at the 5. I agree with D. Karl Malone at the 4 spot was a beast. That pick and roll, him and Stockton at pick and roll, unstoppable. At the 3, I don't know at the 3 yet. But at the 2, Mike, of course. And at the point guard, I'm going to go with GP.
Only because there's another decade to go, which is a really large verbal parachute for me at this point at center, which will be him. But in the 90s, I would take Akeem Olajuwon and what it is that he represented at the center position. I mean, he redefined what it was to be an athlete at that spot in much the way that, Chamberlain did with his footwork and athleticism. He was incredible. At the 4, Karl Malone and Charles is an awesome debate, but I would choose Karl Malone to play the 4 spot. At the small forward, I've talked to Grant at length about his career. I mean, he was absolutely the guy that was going to be what the league was about. Class, could do everything on the court and off the court. He was going to be that guy. And because of injuries and things that happened, Because of Scottie Pippen winning championships at the small forward, it's hard not to put Scottie Pippen as the best small forward throughout the 90s. Great two guards in the 90s, Reggie Miller, Joe Dumars, Mitch Richmond, Clyde Drexler, all behind Michael Jordan. I mean, there's just not, it's hard to say that, but Reggie, you deserve.
I ain't not dumb enough to put myself.
And then the point guard is a tough one because you're talking about how to play the point guard and guys that could do a little bit of everything. And Gary Payton and John Stockton represented the 90s, this 90s decade in two very, very different ways. And so it depends on what kind of style of ball you'd like to play. And I played with Gary in Seattle, grew up watching him in Oakland at Skyline High School and then on the Oregon State and then his years in Seattle. But I would pick John Stockton, who I think was more capable of doing more things in Utah, but because of that system, did what it was that needed to be done for Jerry Sloan and for Karl Malone.
Everybody satisfied? Everybody had their say here on the 90s?
Reggie?
Well, I mean, you guys are going by position, so I went with the best fives.
There you go.
And they are?
Well, MJ, obviously. Well, let me start by saying special consideration, so people don't get upset. To Isaiah, special consideration to Shaq, and special consideration to Grant. But Charles, Carl, Hakeem, he's really not gonna like this. David Robinson. I mean, David Robinson gets overlooked as one of the best centers of all time.
Reggie, are you thirsty? I want you to drink some of this.
You can say what you want, but 2 championships later in the MVP, David Robinson was a load.
Yeah, no, he was the man.
He was a load in the 90s.
And Patrick Ewing doesn't get a mention from anybody?
He just did.
Just try to be fair at the center.
And when we're talking about centers, he would probably be the 4th behind David, Hakeem, and Shaq. Not in that order. You might be higher, you may be lower. Just because, like you said, we have another decade to go where you get rewarded.
One thing
get every decade.
One thing that we
Why
did.
not?
thing that we did glean out of that whole thing is Georgetown Hoya.
Let
me see it. Ready? Let's see it.
You ready, Hook? Go ahead, Alonzo. Go that way. Kimbe, Patrick, you too. That dumbass running. Eliminate that shot from the game.
All right, we got the 2000s still to go as we wrap up this edition of Open Court. We'll be back to do that right after this.
There was this little good-looking David Beckham little guy running around like a gnat, just would always beat me out in the MVP voting. And I'm averaging 28-15 without the free throws. You got 2, I got 1, Kobe got 1, something wrong with that picture.
We welcome you back to Open Court. We've been talking about teams by decade, and we wrap it up now with the 2000s going up through 2009, I guess. So anything 2010 after, don't go there. All right. Everything good?
Good.
All right.
Great.
Who would like to start giving me a 5 from the 2000s?
Big fella.
I guess you would, big fella.
Number 5, I'll put Dr. O'Neal.
Okay.
At the 2, you gotta go with the Copester.
Okay.
At the 3, who's at the 3? Give me some names.
LeBron, T-Mac.
Yeah, LeBron.
Melo?
Yeah, LeBron at the 3. At the 4, you gotta go with Mr. Duncan. And the point's gonna be hard. Nash beat me out twice for MVP. I still don't know how.
How about Allen?
AI, yeah, ooh.
Hey, Shaq, do you need to get on the couch now, too?
Actually, I do.
All right, guys, get up for a second.
Hold on.
Put an extender on here. Put the extender.
I was going to extend it.
Put the extender on there, Brad.
Dr. O'Neal.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to hold the feet?
Don't touch the tongs.
What seems to be your overriding concern today? What is your issue? What would you like to get off your chest?
There was this little good-looking David Beckham little guy running around like a gnat, just passing the ball to people and doing this and doing that. He scored every now and then, but I Oh, he would always beat me out in the MVP voting. And I'm averaging 28-15 without the free throws. And I'm going to the finals every year.
Do you not feel that Steve Nash deserved the award at all? There's not a part of you that says, yes, Steve Nash deserved the award for the following reason.
Maybe once, but not twice over the easel. Twice, 2 times in a row. He got 2, I got 1, Kobe got 1. Something wrong with that picture. Whatever camera you're using, throw it away. Get a new camera.
Anything else you need to get off your chest at this point?
No, I'm just, I'm mad I wasn't on Dream Team 1. I'm mad they started the Hacker Shack.
Are you really? Because you've always said that just proves that they're losers or they don't know how to play the game.
That is true, but I wasn't born with the gifts that Reggie and Isaiah and D. Scott were born with. I wasn't born with the shooting touch. I was born with the
So
bully.
are you bitter about that as well?
Yeah, I'm bitter about that. I'm mad about... I'm mad about, what else? I'm mad about Pat Riley used to practice me 5 hours a day. I'm mad Phil Jackson used to come in with something called sage that smelled like weed to me. Not that I know what weed smells like. He used to come in every day and just meditate. I'm mad about a lot. I'm mad Nick Anderson missed those 4 free throws.
Okay, now he's getting real.
Now, man, now. It ain't about Nick, though. It ain't about Nick. It's about Kenny walking around thinking he a legend now. Come on, Nick. All you gotta do is make one, Nick Anderson.
There's a lot going on in there, and since this is the last segment, I don't know.
I'm mad Penny had Little Penny.
You guys aren't too uncomfortable with 3 on a bench there, are you? We're good. You stay there. We're in the last segment.
We're good,
fella.
Just stretch out. You just stretch out.
Yeah, go ahead, stay there.
Little Penny dolls running around the locker room. That's Tyra Banks, fool.
You feel better now?
Yeah, I'm
What is wrong with this dude?
So who's your point guard?
I'm gonna go with AI. Because he was fearless. He was really, like me, my thing was any little guy that came in there, I'm gonna touch him up, Ernie. I'm gonna touch him up and lay him down. But he was the only one, besides Gary, he was the only one that just kept coming back. And the year they made it to the finals and got killed by us, he did everything that year.
Oh, Lord.
He did everything.
In here, guys. Give me some 5s.
I got AI, Kobe, I've got Duncan, I've got KG, and I got the big fella.
Ooh.
Not about KG.
Big fella, Tim
My bad,
Duncan,
KG.
LeBron,
Honorable mention.
Special
Kobe.
considerations. Yeah.
Then point guard, I'm going with Jason Kidd.
Mm-hmm. Zeke?
I'm gonna go Jason Kidd, Kobe over AI. I look at AI as a 2, not a 1.
Cool.
Shaq, Duncan, Garnett.
Talk about special consideration when we do these live. Paul Pierce.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Dirk. Certainly in there.
Dirk.
Tracy McGrady.
T-Mac,
Yeah.
Trace McGrady to 3.
Eric Snow.
And what position?
I don't know.
Lay down again. Put Steve Nash into context here for me in 2000. What do you have to do besides win 2 MVPs to get consideration in that span?
You know, I played with him along with Shaq, and I think there's and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's this feeling that Nash really took off and became MVP caliber once the rules kind of changed. And, you know, before that, there was a physicality to the game. And once they took the physicality out, you know, at 31, 32, he had his best years, which you really don't hear of. And so, you know, I think people I think people
Let it go, Shaq.
No,
Let it go.
No way. Never.
Let it go.
Ernie, just so let me preface it. I have Jason Kidd as my 2000 point guard, but I feel like I think I've heard this from people that they feel that he benefited from the rule change, and as a result, you know, had those really good years in the mid.
Only reason why I'm going with AI, I'm taking it back to the playground. If Jason Kidd, AI, Steve Nash, and Gary Payton, they're all lined up, Nasher's going to be the last person selected out of those 3. That's how I'm going to look at it. There's nothing about his talents. I love his talent, but I'm going with those other 3 guys ahead of him.
We're wrapping things up. I wish we could all go around, but I think we've kind of made the point that but there's some special times in this league and some real mileposts in this league that propelled it to the
Let it go, Shaq.
And I think I think Anthony Davis might be one of those guys.
Yeah.
Anthony Davis. Besides the big fella over there.
What is wrong with this kid?
I think Anthony Davis.
Never let that go. Ever.
5 to 10 years of being
Never, ever.
No wonder we didn't win in Phoenix. He's mad at the point guard.
You're right.
I should have signed someplace else.
Christmas Day in Phoenix, right? Grant tells somebody, I ain't gonna say his name, Jason Richardson, don't leave Ginobili open in the corner. Leaves him open in the corner, we leave by 1. We get in the locker room. No, but listen,
snitches. Get up, man.
We get in the locker room.
Come on, 3D.
There's chicken, macaroni, turkey. I just turned everything on. Ain't nobody eating today.
Get up, man.
Nobody.
Shaq, lay back down.
Yeah, lay down.
This is going to take all day. We'll see you next time on Open Court. All right, so Jason Richardson is also an issue for you.
I was mad because I didn't eat that night.
I'm just mad, Ernie.
Like boxing. I think Charles came to play tonight. Dominique does not disappoint. What a play by T-Man. Jimmy Smith hitting for 3. Big time plays here by Steve Smith.
It's another fun-filled episode of Open Court here on NBA TV. I'm Ernie Johnson. Got this great panel here that, and this is a very, all I'm going to say is a very special installment of Open Court, and you'll find out in just a moment. Anyway, Charles Barkley is here. He's, of course, the 11-time All-Star, and always great to see you. Steve Kerr also. Great three-point shooters of all time, like the leading percentage-wise three-point shooter in the history of the NBA. Steve Smith, the Michigan State Spartan, the guy who was once traded for Isaiah Ryder, is also with us. So is Kenny the Jet Smith, who was once traded for a lot of guys.
That's why I took a lot. Some lot guys.
Dominic Wilkins is here as well, the human highlight film. What else do you have to say besides that? He's a Hall of Famer. Tracy McGrady, the recently retired Tracy McGrady.
He's coming back. He's coming back.
Shoot. You've left the door open to play overseas, though, correct?
Yeah, but I don't think I am.
Okay, so that's your fun. And Rick Fox also joins us. You've seen Rick all over the place, like Kenny at North Carolina Tar Heel, and once a guest judge on Paul's Drag Race. And this show is actually she was a guest judge. And so for him, this show is like
All television ain't good to Actually, I just saw Rick on the show recently. I thought you said you were going to say you saw the ball.
For Rick, appearing on this show is actually a step down from that. So, but we appreciate you. We appreciate you being here. So here's why this show is so special. It's fan-driven because we got a bunch of questions that were tweeted to us.
Oh my God!
That viewers would like to hear you guys address these, and so I'm just going to pull some out at random, okay? And I'll try to let you guys drive it when you've answered a question in your mind sufficiently, or nobody else wants to talk about it. Say, hey, next question, okay? We understand this. Got it. We got you. Next question. How about you that Rick was once a guest judge on Anyway, the Democrats said, oh yeah, that's what man. And away we go. Well, listen to this question.
Oh, come on.
I did not even know. But I was
Indiana recruited you.
No, they didn't recruit me. I don't know if he recruited me, but they sent me a letter. And
How do you know what the letter said?
He didn't open it. I didn't open it.
Maybe it said we're not recruiting.
Why do you want to play for Bobby Knight? Because I think that you can get me motivated other by screaming, yelling, and kicking at me.
Smith used to scream, yell.
No, Coach Smith did not scream and yell.
Okay.
And never used profanity. And he never used profanity.
He was the golden.
Have you ever heard him use profanity? Ever?
No.
Never.
But he would. He might. Sometimes I wish he just did.
But if he raised his voice, you were like nervous.
Ernie,
Right.
I want to hear Charles's version of Bobby Knight because he tried out for the Olympics.
You know, it wasn't as bad as people think it was because, like, they invited like 120 people, and I made it down to the final 16. But it was like a trial camp, so he really didn't spend a lot of individual time. I don't think I've ever seen a coach that I couldn't play for, because I think you have to adapt. And the thing about Bobby Knight, I always respect him because he graduated players.
I didn't say couldn't. I said wouldn't.
Yeah. But yelling and screaming don't bother me. You know, I'm one of those guys. I'm a yeller and screamer.
Exactly, because you're a yeller and a screamer.
Yeah, but I'm saying if somebody yells and screams at me, it makes me play better. You know, I was fortunate to play with Rick Mahorn and Derek Smith. And when they yelled, the hardest thing about me when I became the leader of a team, well, I used to yell at guys, and they started crying. And I had to learn who I could yell at and not yell at. That was the hardest thing for me to learn. Because me, Mahorn, and Derek Smith would yell at each other all the time, and we started playing better. But some guys, you can't yell at them. But it wouldn't have bothered me if a coach yelled and cursed.
Give me some more. Anybody else going to be forthcoming?
You know, you would not coach. Wouldn't have I didn't have the chance to him in Boston when he came in. Basically got rid of everybody on that team. But to me, I don't think his style fit in the pros.
Oh, that was deep.
Yeah, man.
Rick Pitino.
I was going to play for Rick.
He's going to play for Rick?
For me, it was Chris Ford.
You would not want to play for Chris
Ever again.
Oh, ever again?
We were both on that team.
Man,
we were both on that.
I played with some tough. I played for some tough coaches.
You might want to re-answer your question. That's the way we're phrasing it.
Hey, I played for some tough coaches, right? But I don't know what you call Chris Ford.
Yeah,
I mean, some of the stuff that he would say to players, it wasn't even basketball cursing out. You know what I'm saying? He just said stuff almost like about your family. You know, stuff like that. It was tough, man. And it was many times that he and I, and Rick can tell you, I wanted to choke him a couple of times. I mean, that's how bad it got.
I left a couple
But, you know, and as bad as it got, I remember him telling me right before we went in the playoffs, and he had one of the assistant coaches come over and tell me, he said, tell Nick that he got to get this team ready for the playoffs. We're counting on him. Now, he hadn't played me for like 15 games. He would pay me 2 or 3 minutes and take me out. That was his way of paying me back. And then he says, you got to get the team ready to play. And I said to him, I won't tell you exactly what I said to him, but I told him, you know, all due respect, I'll play hard because I'm a player, I'm a competitor. I'm going to do whatever I can do to win. I said, don't ever say anything to me the rest of the year.
Why don't you say what you said? We can put it on TV.
I said, I hate you.
Forget you.
Okay, that's what I said. But, man, that's the worst guy I've ever played for.
Okay, I'm going to call a move on from that question.
This boy, man, sweating over there, man. He looked like he was about to choke up.
I was ready to choke Ernie. Thinking he was Chris Ford.
Chris Ford and Bob Knight texting right now. Are you watching Open